5,000 years ago, Deathworlders endured. Where no species could, the dust on Kepler 442b had not been disturbed for thousands of years. Dr. Thakal pressed his six-fingered hand against the ancient metal surface, feeling the cold bite through his environmental suit. The Zenthari archaeologist had spent 40 years digging through the ruins of forgotten civilizations, but nothing had prepared him for this. "The dating results are back," his assistant Mira said through the comm link. Her voice carried an unusual tremor. "Sir, you need to see this." Thakal pulled himself away from the strange metallic structure. It looked like a ship, but the design was primitive and brutal. Thick armor plating covered every surface. The engines were massive, inefficient things that probably burned through fuel at an alarming rate. Yet something about it suggested purpose, as if every design choice had been made for survival rather than elegance. He walked through the red sand toward their research tent. The planet's twin suns cast long shadows across the excavation site. Around him, his team worked carefully, brushing away centuries of accumulated dust from structures that shouldn't exist. Inside the climate-controlled tent, Mira pulled up the holographic display. Numbers floated in the air, glowing blue against the dim interior. Thakal's three eyes widened as he read the results. 5,000 years? He checked the calibration data. "Run it again." "This must be an error. We've run it 6 times, sir. Different samples, different methods. They all say the same thing." Mira's scales had turned pale, a sign of stress in her species. These ruins are 5,000 years old. Thakal felt his legs weaken. He sat down heavily on a supply crate. 5,000 years ago, his own people, the Zenthari, were still living in caves. The Galactic Council didn't exist. Spaceflight was something no species had achieved. Yet here was evidence of advanced technology. Primitive by modern standards, but far beyond what any species should have possessed at that time. "What about the skeletal remains?" he asked quietly. Mira pulled up another display. A 3-dimensional image of bones appeared, rotating slowly. The skeleton was bipedal, roughly 2 meters tall. The skull was rounded with forward-facing eyes, but it was the density of the bones that caught Thakal's attention. They were incredibly thick, designed to withstand tremendous stress. "The medical team is baffled," Mira explained. "Look at the muscle attachment points. This creature was incredibly strong, and here, the bone density is 3 times what we'd expect for a species of this size. The rib cage suggests redundant organs. Double the kidneys, what appears to be a backup liver system. What species is this?" Mira hesitated. "The genetic markers are degraded, but we managed to get a partial sequence. Sir, it matches human DNA." The tent fell silent except for the hum of the environmental processors. Thakal stared at the skeleton, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes were seeing. "That's impossible," he said finally. "Humans only achieved spaceflight 300 years ago. We have complete records of their development. They came from a single planet, Earth, in a quiet corner of the galaxy. There's no way they could have been here 5,000 years ago." "I know what the records say." Mira pulled up more data. "But we've found over 30 skeletons now. All human, all 5,000 years old. And sir, there's more." She led him outside to a newly uncovered section of the ruins. A team of researchers stood around a large metal door that had been buried under meters of sediment. Strange symbols were carved into its surface. Thakal recognized some of them from ancient human languages that supposedly went extinct millennia ago on Earth. "We found a data storage device inside," one of the researchers said. She was a young Korthan, her fur matted with dust. "It's heavily damaged, but our computers managed to extract some fragments." They returned to the tent and gathered around the main display. The Korthan researcher activated the recovered data. Static filled the screen, then cleared to show text in an ancient human language. The translation software struggled with the dialect but managed to provide a rough interpretation. "Colony log, day 473, Thakal read aloud. "We've lost another transport to the radiation storms. 200 souls gone. Commander Chen says we need to dig deeper, build underground. The surface is too hostile. But we knew this would be hard. We knew we were coming to a world that would try to kill us. That's why they let us have it." The message continued, detailing the struggles of a human colony on a world that seemed designed to destroy them. They spoke of equipment failures, food shortages, and mysterious illnesses caused by local radiation. Yet through it all, there was a grim determination in their words. More fragments appeared. Ship logs, personal journals, technical manuals. Each piece added to the growing picture of an ancient human civilization spread across multiple star systems. They had been here 5,000 years ago, surviving on worlds that the current Galactic Council classified as uninhabitable. "Here's something interesting," Mira said, pulling up another fragment. "It mentions something called the Silence. It seems to be an event that happened to them, but the context is missing." The Khal studied the text. The humans wrote about the silence with fear and sadness. It had taken something from them, something precious, but what? The next fragment made his blood run cold. Earth status lost. Star destabilization confirmed not natural. Repeat, not natural. "We were targeted. We were meant to die. What does that mean?" the Korthan researcher asked. "Who would target a pre-spaceflight civilization?" The Khal didn't answer. He was reading another recovered file, this one marked as a planetary classification. The words made no sense to him. Earth Class 12 Deathworld. "That's impossible," he muttered. "The classification system only goes up to Class 9. Nothing above that can support life. It's too hostile." "Maybe it's an error in translation," Mira suggested, but she didn't sound convinced. The Khal pulled up the Galactic Council's official planetary classification database. He'd helped write parts of it himself. Class 9 worlds were the most extreme environments where life could exist. Heavy gravity, toxic atmospheres, extreme temperature variations. Only the hardiest species could colonize them, and even then with significant technological support. Class 12 didn't exist because it couldn't exist. Any world that hostile would kill anything that tried to live on it. Yet according to these ancient humans, Earth was Class 12 and they had evolved there naturally. "Sir, look at this," another researcher called out from across the tent. She'd been analyzing the ship fragments. "The hull composition is strange. It's designed to withstand incredible punishment. Radiation shielding is 10 times thicker than our modern ships use. The life support systems are built with triple redundancies. This ship was built by people who expected everything to fail." The Khal walked over to examine the data. The ship design was brutal in its practicality. Every system had a backup. Every backup had a backup. There was no elegance, no aesthetic consideration, just pure survival engineering. "They built this expecting to die," he said quietly, "but they went anyway." As the day progressed, more fragments emerged from the data storage. Stories of human colonies scattered across the harshest worlds in the galaxy. Worlds with crushing gravity. Worlds where the atmosphere was poison. Worlds bombarded by lethal radiation. Places where no civilized species would dare to settle. And yet the humans had gone there. They had survived. According to the fragmented records, they had even thrived. The final fragment they recovered that day was a video file. It was badly corrupted, but showed a woman in a primitive pressure suit standing on a windswept plain. Behind her, a colony of dome structures huddled against the hostile landscape. She looked directly at the camera, her face lined with exhaustion but her eyes bright with defiance. "My name is Commander Sarah Chen," she said. "If you're seeing this, it means we didn't make it. But know this, we didn't give up. We fought for every breath, every day of survival. We were humanity, and we endured where no one else could." The message ended in static. The Khal stood in silence, staring at the empty screen. Around him, his research team was equally quiet. They had just discovered evidence that rewrote galactic history. Humanity had been among the stars thousands of years before anyone knew. They had survived on worlds that should have killed them, and then they had vanished, leaving only ruins and questions behind. The Khal looked out at the excavation site, at the ancient human ship slowly emerging from the sand. "We need to contact the Galactic Council," he said. "They need to know about this. All of them, especially the humans themselves. They deserve to know their true history. They deserve to know what their ancestors had endured. 5,000 years in the past, Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, unaware of its approaching doom. Dr. James Morrison stood in the observation deck of the orbital research station, watching his homeworld turn slowly below. The data on his tablet told a story that terrified him. "The star is dying," he said to the assembled emergency council. "Not in a billion years like it should. In 40 years, maybe less." The room erupted in chaos. Politicians shouted questions. Scientists demanded to see his data. Military officers began calculating logistics. But Morrison just stood there watching Earth turn, knowing that everything down there, all 7 billion people, had just been handed a death sentence. How is this possible? the UN Secretary General demanded. Our sun is stable. It should burn for billions of years more. Morrison pulled up the stellar analysis charts. The numbers painted a clear picture. Something was wrong with the sun's core. The fusion processes were accelerating, becoming unstable. In 40 years, maybe 50 if they were lucky, the sun would expand into a red giant and swallow the inner planets. We don't know how, Morrison admitted. The math doesn't work. Stars don't just suddenly die like this. But the evidence is undeniable. We need to evacuate. Evacuate 7 billion people? The Secretary General laughed bitterly. To where? We have 3 colony ships under construction and 12 research stations across the solar system. We can save maybe 1 million people at best. Then we build more ships, said Commander Sarah Chen. She was the youngest person in the room, barely 30, but she commanded the only functional deep space vessel humanity possessed. We build them fast, we build them crewed, and we go. Go where? Someone asked. We haven't found any habitable worlds within our FTL range. Sarah pulled up a star chart. There are worlds out there. We just haven't been able to claim them because they're already occupied or too hostile. But hostile is better than dead. The debate raged for hours. Some argued for lottery systems to choose who would be saved. Others wanted to focus resources on underground bunkers on Earth, riding out the catastrophe. A few suggested that Morrison's data must be wrong, that they had time to find a better solution. But deep down they all knew the truth. Humanity had 40 years to become a spacefaring species, or cease to exist entirely. The exodus began immediately. Every nation poured resources into ship construction. The vessels they built were ugly, inefficient things. Thick armor plating to protect against radiation, oversized engines that guzzled fuel, life support systems designed with so many redundancies that the ships were 50% heavier than they needed to be. We can't afford all these backup systems, an engineer complained to Sarah as they reviewed designs for Colony Fleet 7. We could fit twice as many people if we stripped out the redundancies. Sarah looked at him coldly. When the main oxygen recycler fails 3 years into a 10-year journey, those backup systems will keep everyone alive long enough to fix it. Build the redundancies. The ships took shape in orbital construction yards. Humanity had never attempted anything on this scale. Accidents killed thousands of workers. Several partially constructed vessels had to be scrapped when critical design flaws were discovered. But slowly, painfully, the fleet grew. Meanwhile, humanity's telescope searched the stars for refuge. Most habitable worlds were already claimed by the hierarchy, an ancient civilization that dominated the galaxy. The hierarchy had been watching Earth for centuries, studying humanity like scientists observing an interesting bacterial culture. When humanity sent out their first FTL distress call, the hierarchy responded. Their message was clinical and cold. We acknowledge your stellar crisis. Unfortunately, all habitable worlds within your range are claimed by member species of the hierarchy. We cannot offer refuge as your biology is incompatible with our ecosystems. However, we can provide coordinates to unclaimed worlds. Be advised, these worlds are unclaimed for valid reasons. The coordinates arrived and humanity's scientists studied them in horror. Every single world was classified as hostile by hierarchy standards. High-gravity worlds that would crush human bones over time. Frozen ice planets where temperatures never rose above -100 degrees. Radiation-soaked moons orbiting gas giants. Worlds with toxic atmospheres or extreme tectonic activity. They're sending us to death worlds, Morrison said quietly. Places they consider too dangerous to colonize. Then we'll survive on death worlds, Sarah replied. She'd been chosen to lead Colony Fleet 7. Bound for a high-gravity planet the hierarchy called Unsuitable 442. The hierarchy said the 2.4G gravity would cripple any species within a generation. Sarah thought they could adapt. The years passed in frantic preparation. Humanity learned to build FTL drives through brutal trial and error. The first test flight killed everyone aboard when the drive malfunctioned and spread the ship across 3 light-years of space as scattered atoms. The second test flight worked, but the crew suffered severe radiation exposure. The third test flight actually succeeded. Humanity learned from every failure. They built thicker shielding. They added more safety protocols. They accepted that spaceflight would be dangerous and prepared for it. As the deadline approached, Earth became a world of goodbyes. Families were split by lotteries. Children were prioritized for evacuation, but there weren't enough spaces for all of them. The elderly volunteered to stay behind, giving their spots to younger people who might have a chance. Sarah stood in her childhood home in Seattle one last time. Her parents had refused evacuation, arguing that others needed the spots more. Her mother hugged her tightly. "You survive," her mother whispered. "Whatever it takes, you survive. Make sure humanity continues." "I will," Sarah promised, not knowing if she could keep that promise. The day of the Great Exodus arrived. Thousands of ships launched from Earth, from Mars, from construction yards across the solar system. They were a ragtag fleet of desperate survivors fleeing into the unknown. The hierarchy watched from their perfect worlds, documenting humanity's flight with detached scientific interest. One hierarchy observer, an entity known as the Watcher, compiled a report on the human evacuation. It calculated survival probabilities for each colony fleet. Fleet 7, heading to the high-gravity world, had a projected survival rate of 3% over 10 years. Most fleets had similar or worse odds. "Fascinating," the Watcher noted in its report. "The humans choose certain death over quick death. Their psychology is unusual. They understand they are likely doomed yet proceed anyway. Recommend continued observation to document extinction timeline." Sarah's fleet consisted of 42 ships carrying 50,000 people. They jumped into FTL space, leaving the solar system behind. The journey would take 6 months with their crude drives. 6 months in cramped quarters, breathing recycled air, eating synthesized food, and hoping nothing broke. Everything broke. 3 ships lost main power in the first week. They had to be towed by other vessels, draining fuel reserves across the fleet. The water recyclers on half the ships malfunctioned, causing rationing. 2 ships collided during a formation adjustment, killing 300 people. A virus spread through Fleet 7, overwhelming their limited medical facilities. But they didn't turn back. There was no back to turn to. Sarah spent every day solving crisis after crisis. She slept 4 hours a night and lived on stimulants. When a ship's captain had a mental breakdown from the stress, she took over direct command of that vessel while maintaining control of the fleet. When food riots broke out on 3 ships simultaneously, she didn't threaten punishment. She just opened a comm channel and told them the truth. "We're all scared," she said. "We're all tired and hungry and wondering if we'll survive. But we will survive because we're human and we don't quit. We adapt, we endure. We'll make it to our new world, and we'll build something there, something that will last. But only if we work together." The riots stopped. People went back to their duties. They fixed the broken systems. They rationed the limited food. They took care of each other. When Fleet 7 finally dropped out of FTL space above their destination world, Sarah stood on the bridge and stared at humanity's new home. It was a harsh, unwelcoming planet. Heavy clouds obscured most of the surface. The gravity pulled at her even through the ship's compensators. Scans showed extreme atmospheric pressure at sea level and fierce storms that never stopped. The hierarchy said nothing could live there. The hierarchy was about to be proven wrong. "All ships," Sarah announced across the fleet channel. "Prepare for landing. We're home." Below them, the death world waited. Behind them, Earth burned. Ahead of them lay only uncertainty and struggle. But they were humanity, and they would endure where no one else could. The first generation born on Gravitas Prime never knew normal gravity. Little Marcus Chen came into the world screaming under 2.4 times Earth's gravitational pull. The doctors worried he wouldn't survive. His bones might not develop properly. His heart might fail under the constant strain. Marcus grew up to be the strongest human who had ever lived. 50 years after the landing, Commander Sarah Chen walked through New Seattle with her grandson. She was 70 now, and the gravity was finally breaking her down. Her bones ached constantly. Her heart struggled. The children born here moved past her like graceful dancers. Their bodies perfectly adapted to the crushing weight that was slowly killing her generation. "Grandma, you're walking too slow," Marcus said. He was 12 and already taller than she was. His muscles were dense, his bones thick. He could lift weights that would have crushed his grandmother. "I'm walking as fast as I can," Sarah replied with a tired smile. "You kids don't know how lucky you are." "Lucky?" Marcus looked around at the gray sky, the heavy rain, the dome city that protected them from the crushing atmospheric pressure. "We live in a prison." "We live," Sarah corrected him. "That makes us lucky." The city sprawled beneath multiple protective domes, each one a marvel of engineering that the first generation had built through blood and sacrifice. Outside the domes, the atmosphere would kill an unprotected human in minutes. The storms were so fierce they could strip flesh from bone. The gravity made every movement exhausting for the original colonists. But humanity adapted. They always adapted. On the frozen world of Frostholm, similar miracles occurred. The temperature outside the colony never rose above -140 degrees Celsius. The hierarchy had classified it as a lifeless ice ball, suitable only for automated mining operations. But Commander James Wilson and his 30,000 colonists had made it home. They built their city deep underground, where geothermal heat kept them warm. They engineered new crops that could grow under artificial light. They developed pressure suits that could withstand the brutal cold for short excursions to the surface. The second generation on Frostholm grew up in tunnels and caves. They became master engineers, learning to coax warmth from the planet's core and create livable spaces in the most unlikely places. They built vertical farms that fed twice as many people as the limited surface agriculture on warmer worlds. They turned their frozen hell into a fortress of survival. Wilson stood at the entrance to the surface one morning, watching his daughter prepare for an expedition. Maya was 25 and had never seen an unprocessed sky. Everything above them was filtered through ice and rock. "I'm going to map the northern thermal vents," Maya said, checking her pressure suit seals. "We think there's a new source of geothermal energy there." "Be careful," Wilson said, knowing his words were unnecessary. His daughter had been training for surface operations since she was 10. She knew the cold better than he ever would. "Dad, we're going to expand the colony to the surface someday," Maya said confidently. "We'll engineer suits that let us live up there under the sky. We'll see the stars without barriers." Wilson nodded, even though he doubted it would happen. But doubt was for his generation. The children didn't know how to doubt. They only knew how to solve problems. On Radiance, a moon bathed in lethal radiation from its gas giant parent, humanity went underground permanently. Commander Lisa Rodriguez and her fleet had arrived at a world that should have killed them within days. The radiation levels were so high that even their shielded ships registered dangerous exposure levels. They landed on the dark side of the moon and started digging immediately. Within a year, they had created a network of tunnels deep beneath the surface. Within 5 years, they had built an entire city underground. Within 20 years, Radiance Colony was the largest of all human settlements, home to 80,000 people who had never seen direct sunlight. The children of Radiance developed perfect dark vision. They could navigate the deepest tunnels with minimal light. They became expert miners, extracting resources from their moon with efficiency that would have amazed their grandparents. They built libraries and schools and parks, all underground, all lit by artificial light. Lisa walked through Central Cavern, the heart of Radiance Colony, and marveled at what they had built. The cavern was enormous, carved from solid rock over decades. Buildings rose toward the distant ceiling. Trees grew under artificial suns. Children played in parks that existed hundreds of meters below the radiation-soaked surface. "It's beautiful," her deputy, Commander Patel, said. He was dying of radiation exposure, one of the last of the first generation. They had absorbed too much in those early days when shielding was primitive, and they didn't understand the danger. "We did it," Lisa replied. "We actually survived." "More than survived," Patel said. "We're thriving." The hierarchy watched all of this with growing confusion. The Watcher updated its reports regularly, documenting humanity's impossible persistence. Every projection said the colonies should have failed. Disease should have wiped them out. Equipment failures should have caused cascading collapses. The hostile environments should have broken their spirits. Instead, the human colonies grew. They made contact with each other, sharing resources and knowledge across the light years. They helped each other survive, sending supply ships and expertise wherever it was needed. When Gravitas Prime discovered a new alloy that could withstand high pressure, they shared the formula with all other colonies. When Frostholm developed better insulation technology, they freely gave it to everyone. The hierarchy found this behavior baffling. In their civilization, each species guarded its advantages jealously. Resources were traded, not given. Knowledge was power, not something to be shared freely. But humans operated differently. They saw themselves as one species, one people, even when separated by light years. Every colony's success was everyone's success. Every new discovery benefited all of humanity. 50 years after the Exodus, the colonies began to stabilize. The first generation was dying off, worn down by the hostile worlds they had tamed. But the second generation was thriving. They had been born to these worlds, shaped by them, adapted to them. On Titan Station, orbiting a gas giant, Commander David Chang watched his grandson work on a zero-gravity construction project. The boy moved through space with casual grace, his body perfectly adapted to life without gravity. His bones were less dense than his grandfather's, but his spatial reasoning was superior. He could think in 3 dimensions without effort. "You're a space creature," David said over the comlink. "You'd probably struggle on a planet." "That's okay, Grandpa," his grandson replied. "I don't need a planet. Space is my home." And that was the secret of human survival. They didn't try to recreate Earth on these hostile worlds. They adapted to the worlds themselves. They let their children become something new, something suited to their environments. The children of Gravitas Prime were stronger. The children of Frostholm were more efficient. The children of Radiance could see in the dark. The children of Titan Station could live in zero gravity. Each colony produced humans uniquely adapted to their specific challenges. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, something was happening to the hierarchy. Their perfect civilization was beginning to crack. They had lived in comfort for so long that they had forgotten how to adapt. When problems arose, they applied technology rather than changing themselves. But technology had limits, and the hierarchy was about to discover that even ancient, powerful civilizations could fall. A quantum plague appeared first on the hierarchy homeworld. It spread through their bio-integrated technology, the systems they had merged with their own bodies. The hierarchy had augmented themselves for millennia, adding technological enhancements until the line between biology and machine was blurred. The plague exploited that integration. It corrupted their technology and damaged their biology simultaneously. The hierarchy's greatest strength became their fatal weakness. Sarah Chen received the distress call on Gravitas Prime just before she died. She was 90 years old, her body finally giving out after decades of fighting the crushing gravity. But her mind was still sharp and she understood what the message meant. "They need help," she told her grandson Marcus, who now commanded the colony. "The hierarchy is dying." "They watched us suffer," Marcus said bitterly. "They offered us death worlds and expected us to fail. Why should we help them?" Sarah grabbed his hand with surprising strength. "Because we're better than that. Because we're human. And we don't let people die when we can save them. Besides," she smiled weakly, "we're experts at surviving impossible situations. Maybe it's our turn to teach them." Those were Sarah Chen's last words. She died an hour later, surrounded by family, on a world that was supposed to kill her within a generation. She had survived for 44 years on Gravitas Prime, and had seen humanity transform from refugees into thriving colonists. Her grandson looked at the hierarchy distress call for a long time. Then he opened a channel to all human colonies across known space. His message was simple. "The hierarchy is dying. They need our help. I know what they did to us, or rather what they didn't do, but we're going to help them anyway. Because that's what humans do. Prepare relief fleets. We launch in 1 week." The hierarchy homeworld of perfection was dying, and the Watcher could do nothing but observe and record. The quantum plague spread through the city networks like fire through dry grass. Citizens collapsed in the streets as their bio-integrated systems failed. Hospitals overflowed with victims the doctors couldn't treat. The most advanced medical technology in the galaxy was useless against a plague that existed in both quantum and biological states simultaneously. The Watcher stood in the council chamber surrounded by chaos. The great leaders of the hierarchy argued and panicked in equal measure. They had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had built paradise worlds and eliminated disease and suffering. They had evolved beyond the limitations of pure biology, and now they were dying because they had evolved too far, integrated too deeply with their technology. "We need to shut down all bio-integration networks," one council member insisted. "Isolate the plague. If we do that, 80% of our population will die immediately," another countered. "We're too dependent on our augmentations. Our natural bodies can't survive without them." The Watcher listened and understood the terrible truth. The hierarchy had made themselves perfect for their perfect worlds. They had eliminated every hardship, smoothed away every rough edge. In doing so, they had eliminated their ability to adapt to unexpected challenges. The distress calls had been sent to every known species. Most were too primitive to help. Others were too far away. The few responses that came back were sympathetic but useless. No one had encountered anything like the quantum plague before, except humanity. The human response arrived in the form of 40 ships that looked like they had been assembled from scrap metal. They dropped out of FTL space in formation, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Commander Marcus Chen of the Human Relief Fleet. We received your distress call. We're here to help." The Hierarchy Council was desperate enough to accept aid from the species they had written off as doomed refugees. They had no choice. Marcus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Endurance, and studied the readings from perfection. The plague was spreading exponentially. The hierarchy had maybe 6 months before total collapse. "What do you need?" the council asked via communication channel. "Everything," Marcus replied. "Complete medical data on your species, full technical specifications on your biointegration systems, samples of the plague, and you need to start evacuating your population." "Evacuate? To where?" Marcus pulled up a star chart showing the human colonies. "To our worlds. We have room. It won't be comfortable for you, but you'll be alive." The Hierarchy Council looked at the planetary data for human colonies and recoiled in horror. High gravity, extreme cold, radiation, toxic atmospheres. These were the death worlds they had given humanity out of necessity, never expecting them to actually survive there. "We can't live on those worlds," a council member said weakly. "You can't stay here either," Marcus replied bluntly. "You're dying. We're offering you a chance to live. It won't be easy, but we'll help you adapt." The hierarchy had no choice. They began evacuating. The first hierarchy citizens to arrive on human colonies were shocked by the conditions. On Gravitas Prime, the 2.4G gravity crushed them immediately. They couldn't walk. Their delicate bodies, adapted to gentle 0.8G worlds, simply collapsed under the weight. Marcus's people were ready. They had prepared special support frames that carried the hierarchy citizens and helped their bodies withstand the gravity. They set up special low-gravity habitats inside the domes, sealed environments where the hierarchy could move freely without being crushed. "This is barbaric," one hierarchy refugee complained. "We're confined to tiny spaces. We can't go outside. We can't experience your world." "Welcome to Death World living," a human medic replied cheerfully. "You get used to it." On Frostholm, hierarchy citizens huddled in the warmest sections of the underground city, shivering despite the heating systems. They had lived their entire lives in perfectly climate-controlled environments. The concept of cold was alien to them. Maya Wilson, now the colony commander, assigned human families to help each hierarchy group, show them how to layer clothing, teach them about insulation, help them understand that cold is something you manage, not something you eliminate. On Radiance, the hierarchy citizens refused to go underground initially. Their species needed sunlight for their biology to function properly. Living in permanent darkness was unthinkable. "Then you'll die on the surface from radiation," the human authorities told them plainly. "Or you'll adapt. We've got artificial sunlight in the tunnels. It's not the same, but it works. Your choice. Certain death or uncomfortable life." The hierarchy chose uncomfortable life. Meanwhile, human medical teams studied the quantum plague with intense focus. They worked on hierarchy worlds in full protective gear, examining the sick and analyzing the plague's structure. The disease was unlike anything they had encountered, existing partially in quantum superposition, attacking both technology and biology. Dr. Jennifer Park, a third-generation human from Radiance Colony, led the research effort. She had been born underground, raised in artificial light, trained in medicine by correspondence with other colonies. She looked at the plague data with fresh eyes, unbiased by hierarchy assumptions. "It's not attacking randomly," she announced after weeks of study. "It's targeting the integration points between biology and technology. The more integrated you are, the more vulnerable you become. Then the solution is to remove the integration," the Watcher suggested. "That would kill most of your people," Jennifer replied. "They're too dependent. But we might be able to introduce a buffer, something biological that can adapt faster than your technology, a living bridge that can change and evolve." "What kind of biological buffer?" Jennifer smiled. "Human gut bacteria, actually. Modified versions. Our bodies have trillions of microorganisms that help us function. They're not integrated technology, they're symbiotic life. They adapt constantly. We think we can engineer versions that can survive in your biointegration networks and defend against the plague." The idea was insane by hierarchy standards. Deliberately introduce bacteria into their perfect, sterile systems? But they were desperate. The first trials were conducted on volunteers. Human-derived bacteria were introduced into hierarchy biointegration networks. At first, nothing happened. Then slowly the bacteria began to adapt to their new environment. They multiplied, forming colonies throughout the integration networks, and wherever they spread, the quantum plague retreated. The bacteria weren't perfect. They caused side effects. Hierarchy citizens felt sick, feverish, uncomfortable as their bodies fought and adapted to the foreign organisms. But they survived. The plague couldn't gain a foothold where the bacteria thrived. "It's working," Jennifer reported to Marcus. "Survival rate is 93% for treated patients. We can beat this." Over the next 6 months, human medical teams spread across hierarchy space, distributing the bacterial treatment. The plague began to retreat. Hierarchy citizens recovered, though they were changed by the experience. They had bacteria living inside them now, adapting and evolving. They were no longer perfectly sterile beings. They had become messier, more biological, more alive. The Watcher observed all of this with fascination. The humans had saved the hierarchy using crude biological solutions, not advanced technology. They had used adaptation, not perfection. They had survived on Deathworlds by accepting discomfort and hardship, and now they had taught the hierarchy the same lesson. As the crisis passed, the Hierarchy Council met with Marcus to express gratitude. But they were also terrified. Humanity now possessed all their technology, all their knowledge. In saving the hierarchy, humans had gained access to 10,000 years of advanced development. "What do you want in return?" the council leader asked Marcus. "What price for our salvation?" Marcus looked at them for a long moment. His body was dense and powerful, adapted to crushing gravity. He was stronger than any hierarchy citizen had ever been. The council feared what humanity might do with their newfound power. "We want to know who destroyed our sun," Marcus said quietly. "Your records go back 10,000 years. You were watching us when it happened. You know it wasn't natural. Tell us who killed Earth." The council leader looked uncomfortable. "That information is classified. It involves threats beyond normal species concerns." "Tell us," Marcus repeated, his voice hard. "We saved you. You owe us truth." The Watcher stepped forward. It had been observing humanity for 50 years. It had watched them survive where they should have died. It had seen them help those who had abandoned them. It understood now what made humans different. "I'll tell them," the Watcher said. "They deserve to know." The Watcher pulled up data files that were thousands of years old. It showed Marcus images of entities that existed partially in other dimensions. Creatures that fed on spacefaring civilizations, waiting until species reached their peak before consuming them. "We call them the Devourers," the Watcher explained. "They exist outside normal space. They target advanced civilizations when they're most vulnerable. Your Earth was scheduled for consumption. The hierarchy knew about them, but we had learned to hide, to stay small and quiet enough not to attract their attention." "You let them kill our world," Marcus said, Doctor. Thakal stood before the Galactic Council and presented findings that no one wanted to believe. The chamber was full of representatives from every major species in known space. They looked at the ancient human artifacts displayed holographically above the floor and tried to understand what they were seeing. 5,000 years ago, Thakal said, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "Humanity was here. They survived on worlds we still classify as uninhabitable. They built colonies where we said nothing could live, and then they vanished, leaving only ruins and questions." "This is impossible," a council member insisted. "Humans achieved spaceflight only 300 years ago. They came from Earth. We have records." "We have incomplete records," Thakal corrected. "The humans we know today are descendants of a few scattered colonies that lost contact with the main human civilization. They don't even know their own history." He pulled up the image of Commander Sarah Chen, the ancient video recovered from the ruins. Her face looked back at the council, defiant and determined. "These were the original humans," Thakal continued. "They survived the destruction of Earth. They endured on Deathworlds. They saved the hierarchy from extinction, and then they left the galaxy to hunt something we can barely comprehend." The council erupted in debate. Some called Thakal's research flawed. Others demanded to see more evidence. A few sat quietly, their faces showing dawning horror as they realized what this meant. The Watcher had come to the council session, now ancient even by hierarchy standards. It was one of the few beings alive who remembered the true history. "It's all true," the Watcher said, its voice cutting through the chaos. "I was there. I watched humanity survive where they should have died. I watched them save us when we deserved no help. And I watched them leave to face the Devourers. What are the Devourers? Someone asked. The Watcher displayed images from classified files, entities that existed in dimensions beyond normal space, creatures that fed on the quantum signatures of advanced civilizations. They were older than recorded history, patient hunters who waited for species to reach technological maturity before consuming them. The hierarchy survived by hiding, the Watcher explained. We kept our civilization small. We avoided advancing too quickly. We made ourselves invisible to the Devourers, but humanity refused to hide. Thakal pulled up more recovered data. Human ships equipped with weapons that seemed designed to fight in dimensions beyond normal space. Research notes about quantum mechanics and dimensional physics. Battle plans against enemies that couldn't be seen or touched in conventional ways. They went to war, Thakal said. 4,000 years ago, humanity gathered every ship, every resource, every weapon they had, and they left the galaxy. They went into the dark spaces between dimensions to hunt the Devourers. Why? A council member asked. Why fight something they couldn't possibly defeat? Because the Devourers destroyed Earth, the Watcher replied. Because humanity doesn't forgive that kind of debt. Because they thought if they eliminated the threat, they could protect the rest of the galaxy. The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood the implication. Humanity had sacrificed itself to protect species that had abandoned them to death worlds. They had gone to fight an impossible war so others could survive. Did they succeed? Someone finally asked. No one knew. For 4,000 years there had been no word from humanity. The few colonies they left behind gradually lost their technology, forgotten by the rest of the galaxy. They redeveloped spaceflight slowly, not knowing their ancestors had already conquered the stars, until Thakal's discovery awakened something. The ancient data storage devices on Kepler 442b hadn't just contained historical records. They had contained a waiting program, dormant for thousands of years, designed to activate when the ruins were finally discovered and studied. The program sent a signal. 3 months after Thakal's presentation to the Council, long-range sensors detected something approaching from deep space. Hundreds of ships, then thousands, appearing at the edge of known space. They used FTL technology far beyond anything the current galaxy possessed. They moved with precision and purpose, and they broadcast on all frequencies in every known language. This is the human expeditionary force. We are returning home. We are humanity, and the war is over. We won. The galaxy panicked. No one knew what to expect from this ancient human civilization that had been fighting in other dimensions for 4,000 years. Would they be warlike? Would they seek revenge for being abandoned? Would they conquer the species that had inherited the galaxy in their absence? The modern human government on Earth was in chaos. They had just learned their species had been spacefaring 5,000 years ago. They discovered their ancestors had saved the hierarchy and fought creatures from other dimensions. And now those ancestors were coming home. Ambassador Helen Torres represented modern humanity in the first contact with the returning fleet. Her ship approached the massive ancient human vessels nervously. They were enormous, covered in weapons and armor, scarred by battles beyond comprehension. The lead ship opened a communication channel. A woman appeared on screen looking remarkably human, despite 4,000 years of separation. She was tall and strongly built, with eyes that had seen too much. I'm Admiral Chen, she said. Descended from Commander Sarah Chen of Gravitas Prime. We're coming home. We're honored to meet you, Helen replied carefully. But we're also concerned. You've been gone for 4,000 years. You've been at war. What do you want? Admiral Chen smiled, and it was tired but genuine. We want to rest. We want to see the sky without scanning for dimensional threats. We want to teach you what we've learned about survival. We want to reunite with the family we left behind. Over the following weeks, the full story emerged. Humanity had spent 4,000 years hunting the Devourers through dimensional spaces where physics worked differently. They had lost millions of people. They had adapted themselves to survive in conditions that made death worlds look comfortable. They had fought enemies that existed partially outside reality. And they had won. The Devourers were extinct. The threat that had haunted advanced civilizations for eons was gone. Humanity had made the galaxy safe at tremendous cost to themselves. The returning humans were different from their modern cousins. They were enhanced, adapted, changed by millennia of warfare in impossible conditions, but they were still human. They still valued survival, adaptation, and the protection of others. Thakal met Admiral Chen during the reunification talks. He looked at her in awe, understanding that she represented a civilization that had endured where no one else could have. "Why did you come back?" he asked. "You could have built your own empire out there. You have technology far beyond ours. You have experience we can't imagine. Why return?" Admiral Chen looked at him with those ancient eyes. "Because we're human. We don't abandon family. The species here in the galaxy, they're descendants of the hierarchy we saved. They're our responsibility. We left to protect them, and now we're back to help them survive whatever comes next." She pulled up a star chart showing the galaxy. "Besides, we learned something out there in the dark. Survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It's about enduring. It's about adapting. It's about helping each other when things get hard." "Those are the lessons you learned on Deathworlds," Thakal said quietly. "Yes. 5,000 years ago, we were forced to survive where no species could. We learned to endure extreme gravity, freezing cold, lethal radiation. We learned that comfort makes you weak and hardship makes you strong. We learned that the species who survive aren't the ones who have it easy. They're the ones who face impossible challenges and refuse to quit." She looked at the representatives from the Galactic Council who had gathered for the talks. "Now we're going to teach you what we know. Because the galaxy is a dangerous place and you need to know how to survive without us." Over the following years, ancient and modern humans worked together. The returning fleet shared their technology, their knowledge, their hard-won experience. They helped colonies develop on worlds previously thought uninhabitable. They taught defensive strategies against threats from beyond normal space. But most importantly, they taught the galaxy how to endure. Thakal continued his archaeological work, uncovering more sites from humanity's first diaspora. Each ruin told the same story. Humans had survived where they shouldn't have. They had adapted to conditions that would kill others. They had endured. On Gravitas Prime, now a thriving human colony with a population of 10 million, a memorial was built to Commander Sarah Chen and all those first refugees who had made survival possible. The inscription was simple. They endured where no species could. They saved those who had abandoned them. They sacrificed themselves to protect the galaxy. They were humanity. Admiral Chen stood before that memorial and saluted her ancestor. "We came home, Commander," she said quietly. "We finished what you started. Earth is being rebuilt. The Devourers are gone. Humanity is reunited. We endured." Behind her, thousands of ships hung in orbit, each one carrying humans who had spent 4,000 years fighting in other dimensions. They had won an impossible war.